Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My guest is Neil Patel, and this is another relationship that I've had for a while back in my higher ed days. Neil actually got 2 degrees from Claremont Graduate University, which is where I used to work. And I met him while he was an alum. And so he would help us with different things and he would be on campus. And how did we connect? I know you know the answer. It is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the best ways for us to stay connected with people. And that's exactly what's happened with Neil and I. And I'm so happy to have him because he has such a cool story and background. And for those of you who are in a certain industry and want to make changes into different functional areas, this is going to be the interview that you want to listen to. And this is why I brought Neil on today. So, Neil, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the time today.
Okay, so let's jump in. I'm not even going to go through your history because I want you to talk about it. So, you're in healthcare, and I would love for you to just give an overview of where you're at now and then maybe some poignant transitions that got you to this place.
Sure. So yeah, as you mentioned, I am in healthcare. Been there for about 15 to 18 years, give or take. So my healthcare journey started way back in 2003, where I ended up going to med school for a couple of years, and then after that, did some residency, and then kind of came out of that side of medicine, or that side of out of the clinical side of medicine, and decided, there's something else out there for me. Not that I hate clinical medicine, I always had a passion for it. I grew up in a family, of physicians, so that was always around medicine, and so that was basically, what I wanted to do with my life. But it got to a point where I liked it, but there's something else out there, something more for me. And so that kind of prompted me to make that transition and go out of clinical medicine and kind of see what the other side of healthcare is, and that's the business side and the admin side. And so that allowed me to go back to school, go to, as you mentioned, Drucker, for my MBA, and then also to SCGH, which is the School of Community and Global Health, for my MPH. And then just taking those courses together side by side kind of allowed me to see the marriage between the two disciplines, if you will, or 2 degrees, and that one kind of feeds out the other. And so that got me interested into that healthcare business side and the admin side. And so taking the skill set that I learned from those 2 degrees, applying it to healthcare and getting more involved with starting off with healthcare insurance and understanding how that works. What are different departments you can go to, what are claims, what does pharmacy do, those types of things. And then and then taking those skills there, learn the tricks of the trade, if you will, or tools of the trade, if you will, and then being able to pivot into more of project management, and then understanding how to take an idea or an initiative and how to put it through the whole ringer and have it go into implementation. Being able to understand that, give me those skill sets, and being able to kind of flourish in that project management space. And then finally, where I'm at today as a senior program manager, taking all those skill sets I've learned in the last few years and being able to not only carry initiatives through, but to be the one who starts thinking about that and understanding, where these ideas come from, why we need them, how will it help the business, and how will it promote, generate revenue and those types of things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now in my career as a program manager, hoping to advance in a couple of years. But that's how I've kind of come to this point in my life and my career.
Oh, that's amazing. So I have to point out because I think sometimes people get really stuck on, okay, I chose this path and I need to stay here. And I feel like healthcare is one of the areas where people might stay in it
Mhm.
longer than they really want to. And if I'm not prying too much, was there familial pressure for you to go into medicine, or was it more like you were just around it and it was something that really intrigued you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say I'd say it's a little bit of both. I think you're gonna hit the a hammer on the nail with this one, or the nail with the hammer on this one. Growing up in an in household, you usually kind of are trying to go into one, of 3 or 4 different types of jobs. Either you'll be a physician, you'll be a lawyer, you'll be a pharmacist, those types of industries or those types of professions. And so, being around medicine so much, it was a natural fit for me to go into that field and to become a physician at the end of my education and whatnot. And so there was a bit of that family pressure, but at the same time, just being around it so much, the interest was there, and just being very science oriented and science focused in elementary school and into high school and then into college. That just kind of stuck with me, and so combining kind of both things kind of put me in that position. And it was nice, while I was in the clinical side. But then you get to that point where it's like something's missing and something's not sitting well internally. And that, to your point of, what are some of the transitions I made in my career, that was probably the major transition that I made, or accepted that I like clinical medicine, but it's not going to be my long-term fit. The skills I learned there are great, but I know there's something more, that I can offer, with my background, with my skills, and just my personality and in general.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because I think there are a lot of people right now, and I think the pandemic really spurred a lot of this as well, where
Mhm.
they were headed down a path because that's what they were exposed to, or that's what the family expected. There are a lot of cultural implications. I know I used to work with students who had a lot of familial pressure, cultural pressure to
Right.
go down certain
Right.
routes, whether it fit or not. But that moment that you're talking about, I really want to make sure that the audience hears that part of your story, because I
Mhm.
think you had that voice in the back of your head that was like, something's not right. And a lot of people will like push that away.
Right.
No, I'm a doctor. I spent all this time, all this money going to school. I'm not going to throw it away, throw, quote unquote, throw it
Mhm.
away
Yeah.
to go do
Yeah.
something else. But the reality is, when you get that, you want to listen to it, because it
Mhm.
means that something is amiss in what you're doing. And what I
Correct.
love about your story is you took that and you were like, okay, I have this skill set. How can I apply it into other functional areas? And you did go
Mhm.
back to school, which is very common when you're making a shift like that. But what a smart shift for you to be able to not let the past go, but
Mhm.
embrace it, learn some additional skills, and move forward, and have a lot of different experiences now that you likely would not have had if you had stayed on that clinical track. So I hope people are
Mhm.
hearing this, because this is such a cool way to think about your career, that some of these traditional career paths were not taught about. And so I love that part of your story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny you bring it up, because in my class that when we graduated from med school, there was about 10, maybe 15 people there, that I was very close with. And if I talk to them today, probably only like 8 of them are really actually still doing medicine, or being a physician and practicing. The other individuals have actually like branched out to different areas of healthcare. I know somebody who's a physical therapist. I know somebody who's gone to the pharma side of things. He's doing like immunoglobulin clinical trials. I know somebody who's a second person who's doing a director of clinical trials. So there's a lot of different avenues out there that really aren't talked about when you're on the traditional track to get to a certain type of career. So that being able to just take a step back, realize something's not sitting right, and just exploring other options. Not to go to the opposite end of the spectrum, but to understand that, hey, I was a physician. I have these kind of skills. Where can I apply these skills, in today's society, in today's workforce, you will, going into public health, that really kind of leans on those type of skills, and there's a little bit of synergy between the two, and then being able to take that and leverage it into also business. It's just a great thing to listen to that voice. Sometimes people push away, like you said, but sometimes listen to it and kind of feel it, and see if it actually makes sense to step away and pivot a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so true. So
Mhm.
true. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Okay, so I like to resource my audience. I want to make sure that we're giving them some really practical advice that they can take with them after they listen to this episode. What are a few pieces of advice that you would give to people out there who are trying to advance their career? So maybe somebody that might be in a similar position to you, or
Mhm.
specifically within healthcare. Like, what do you think are some of the things that you did that you're like, oh, this is the thing people need to know when they're moving up in their career?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess going back to the previous point of me leaving clinical and going to the health the non-clinical side of healthcare, that's the first thing I would say is going outside your comfort zone. Going into some unknown territory, uncharted territory, and say, am I able to do this? Is this something I'm going to be able to take on and flourish and really get into? Most be afraid and not really know, like, oh, this is not what I want to do, because I had this traditional path in my head. I knew step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 was going to be an end in this result. But when you go off that path, you're just like, I don't know what to do now anymore. So there's that fear and that, that level of comfort that you were accustomed to. Stepping out of it, really helps you grow as a person, I think. You expose yourself to different tasks, objectives, different environments. You just, all these types of different avenues you get exposed to really helps you grow and mature and, change the way you look at different things. So you can learn a lot, from just kind of taking one step away from what you're accustomed to, what you're known to. I think a second thing that would probably be important to bring up is just kind of playing to your strengths. So pivoting from clinical to non-clinical, but still bringing in those, medical skills I learned, just kind of putting it into a different avenue, if you will. Just helps you, you can to work on particular job functions. You can play up that angle that, that you are that person on the team who has this particular skill set, this knowledge. You're maybe an SME, in this particular field. So let's use you and utilize you, and you, vice versa, be the go-to person on the team, for that particular ask, if you will. So that's two things that I think are important. Third is sacrificing a little bit, to help build your career, and that's a big, ask of people. But sometimes if you do that, other avenues open up, because if you just if you're just stuck on the same road and the same path, you'll just you'll see light at the end of the tunnel, but it'll take you forever to get there. And sometimes you want to get there, so you want to try and see where else you can go with what you have and the skills you have. And so if you want to, maybe take a pay cut sometimes, or not being able to work from home, or a few hours of fun on the weekend, just kind of give that up and see what you can do. Because if you put in that extra effort, just a little bit of effort here and there, people notice it, and people will see that you're actually working overtime, or you're working on this thing and working on that thing. It gives people that ability to say, hey, Neil's doing something different. He's putting a lot of effort in. He's getting these tasks done, things that we would take longer time to complete. He's getting it done quicker. Just having that ability to go into the office and FaceTime with individuals, that that would really help you kind of get promoted. Get that FaceTime with the different colleagues of yours. Show your executives that you're in it to win it. And it's just basically being able to just make that small transition into giving up a little bit to gain a lot at the end. I'd say maybe two more pieces of information, or things that I kind of rely on, is just is also failure. If you fail on things, don't just get stuck and say I failed and it's over. Like, embrace it. You'll do a lot of projects, you'll do a lot of work, and and then sometimes, most of the time, it won't go according to plan, and you're just gonna have to step back and see what's going on. Take the feedback you get from failed projects, look at it as learning points, understand that this happened, how do you change it, how do I adjust it and make it better for the next time. So that's one more thing. And then lastly, something that I always have an issue with, and something that really bugs me a lot, is perfectionism. I went in thinking I need to be the most perfect version of myself. All my work has to be extremely succinct, detailed, and exact to what they're looking for. That's not always going to happen, and rarely is going to happen that you're ever going to get that. But again, going back to the previous point, learn from it. If you set expectations too high and you fall short, you're gonna short sell yourself, and people are gonna see that. So don't not to set the expectations too low, but at the same time, just be in the middle somewhere. Set something, achieve it, and then grow from that.
Gosh.
I would think I think that's some of the things that I kind of dealt with and I encountered in my career so far. And so if I would do things a little differently, it would just be listen to this advice and listen to these tips. Just basically not push myself to be perfectionist, but be someone who's able to do the work, and time again be consistent with the work, and being able to just build off things that are not perfect or not exact, and then obviously build off things that are working well for you. So small tweaks here and there will get you back on track.
Oh my gosh, Neil, those are so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is become a career coach, man, because that was
yeah, at this point, right?
that was it. That was everything. So one of the things I want to point out, one of your first tips is, listening to that voice, not being afraid to take the leap.
Mhm.
And one of the things I do want to advocate for, and I'm a career coach, so I'm going to advocate for it anyway, is if you're starting to feel that way and the people around you are really pushing up against that feeling because of their own expectations and thoughts of what your life should be or what that
Mhm.
career path should be, that is a really good time to either find a coach to talk through some of those options because they would be a neutral party, or to do some networking and talk to somebody like Neil.
Yeah.
Somebody who has been there or who is in a similar situation, because that's where you get to have a perspective that is not somebody who has a stake in what your life is going to turn out to be, right? And that's just one of the things that I want to advocate for. That's why people get coaches. Like,
Mhm.
getting a coach is not just about, oh, I need help with my resume. That's actually like the last thing that I do. It's really, who are you? What do you want to do? What does this look like? And if you come up against one of those places where you're like, I have no idea, but I know something needs to change, that's the moment where you can enlist additional help to just
Mhm.
help you get past that point. So, oh my gosh, I love all of that. The perfectionist.
Yeah.
Oh man, you're speaking to my audience, because we are high achievers, we're
Mhm.
ambitious, and that perfectionist piece comes in so many conversations. And I mean, it can sideline you sometimes because
Yeah.
you're not willing to take the next step or see the opportunity. I know I have clients all the time who are like, well, I don't 100% fit this job, so I'm not going to apply for it. And I'm like, no, 40 to 50%. If you can do 40 to 50% and you can do the majority of what their required tasks are,
Mhm.
apply for it. Like,
Yeah.
shoot for it. It's never going to be perfect. And you don't want it to be, because then there's no growth there.
Correct.
So, oh man, the
Yeah.
perfectionism.
Yeah, I always tell when people ask me for advice on applying different jobs, I always tell them like you're never gonna find a job that's 100% what you do, right? I mean, unless you're a professional athlete, then that's a different story, or an actor. Those are extreme cases. But you're never gonna find a job description that's like, oh, this is exactly what I do, that's exactly what I do, that's exactly what I gotta do. There's gonna be 50, 60, 70% that makes sense to you, and like, oh, I've done that in the past. I've had some experience with that. So if you see something like that, that's what you go for. Try and apply there, and then when you have the interview and you start talking, then you can kind of feel out a little better, saying, yeah, I can actually make up that extra 30% that I'm not really comfortable with in practice and learning and whatnot. And so that's how you kind of make a distinction, like go for that job, as opposed to not going for it. Because most of what's Wayne Gretzky say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So that's the way I kind of go about it. Just go for it and see where it takes you. That's
Right.
kind of how
And
I ended up in my honest. Yeah.
nice. Well, and
Yeah.
sometimes the learning isn't even the job itself. Sometimes it's needing to be under new management or be in a different
Yeah.
culture or be in a different industry. Somebody going from something like working in a hospital to working for like a tech company, that's
Right.
very different, or working in consulting, right? Like, those are all very different environments that evoke your skill set in a different
Hmm.
way. And sometimes that's what we need in order to move
Yeah.
forward and just get outside of ourselves sometimes. Oh, I love this.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is amazing. So good. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
this is great. Okay. One of my favorite things, again, resourcing our people. I want to know what types of books and things have changed your life. So, can you tell me about a book or a resource or multiple resources, whatever works for you,
Hmm.
that has changed your perspective on your career or life?
Sure. So in terms of just resources in general, as you going back to the LinkedIn plug, that's really been kind of the bread and butter for me in terms of like what's the next move, or what's a good move, or what's the right move. What I usually do is I've got a particular skill set. I've got a couple of degrees. I will go on into LinkedIn and Google who's got the same kind of skill set or who's got the same type of degree. I also recently discovered there's groups for MBIT, for your preferences. So you can also find groups who on LinkedIn that do that, and you can look at the people in the group and what kind of jobs that they have, and that kind of can tell you like, oh, I want to go in this route, or I want to go that route. So that's kind of been my first go-to, is looking on LinkedIn, looking at what people do, looking at the job descriptions they have, the tasks they do, and say that's something I want to do. I'd like to reach out to that person and see if I can get 5 or 10 minutes of their time on a phone call and just pick their brain on next moves or ideas. So that's my usual go-to to that. Secondly, is obviously if I have a job in mind, Google it. Look for job descriptions online, because sometimes like I'm a senior program manager. What that entails maybe different in healthcare versus tech versus some looking at TikTok or Netflix or or Hulu or Facebook. The job description may be different. The job title will be the same, but what you do might be a little different. So looking at from that perspective, what industry do you want to go into? Look for that title in the industry, and that can kind of help you hone in on to like, does this fit my mold? Does this fit my skill set? Is this something I'm interested in? Let's pursue it, or maybe not so much. Let's go a different route. So that's the second thing I do. And then third, in terms of books, I have to admit I haven't been the best with reading in the last couple of years. Kind of fell off the wagon with that.
Not everybody likes to read.
Right.
I think that's actually a really important distinction to make. I talk about books because I'm like a book nerd and I love books, but I have friends who don't. It's not the way that they take in information. And that's absolutely okay.
Right.
So.
Right. But I would say recently, I kind of, now with the pandemic, and then before that, starting to just kind of get my career up and going, kind of learn things. When you get into you make a pivot, you want to try and get the most information out of it. So I'm doing a lot of like Udemy courses and Coursera courses and trying to learn a little bit more about, tasks and stuff that are involved. So I'll do a little reading, online. I'll take some courses online as well. But the book that I had recently that really spoke to me is a book called Limitless by Jim Quick. Very interesting book because it was recommended to me by a good friend of mine. And basically, in short, what that book helps you do is to kind of work through mental barriers and find ways to get to your max potential or full potential, by doing different types of learning, different types of reading, different types of memory work. So it kind of like gives you that work harder, work smarter, not harder kind of idea. So very interesting book to read. I recommend it for everybody. A little backstory on the author. He actually had some traumatic brain injuries when he was young. And so his learning was kind of stunted. And so he had to come up with different ways and different techniques to kind of catch up with the class that he was in. And so this book kind of really details and kind of talks about what he did. So for example, he, without giving too much away about the book, he would do something like listen to music when you're studying. And then, have that kind of helps you calm down. Particular music helps kind of, increase your brain activity. So that was one tip he said. Second thing was something like chew gum, when you're studying, because or chew the same type of gum when you're studying and taking the test, because somehow there's an association between that flavor and what you read, and it comes through on the test, and so it helps you remember those things easier and better. The recall is a lot better. And then he comes up with things like Pomodoro techniques and loci techniques. Basically, those are techniques where you kind of time yourself for 20 minutes, 25 minutes, undisturbed, undistracted work. Just focus on what you're doing, and then step away for 5 minutes, and then do it again, and step away for 5 minutes, and then starting to build up that resilience to just be focused be focused longer and more into the work as you go along. And loci is basically just looking at the room or something and associating something you studied with a particular object in the room. And then when you go to work or you go to test or you go to present, you mentally walk through a room and go to each object that you identified a particular term with, and that helps you recall and then do the presentation. So things like that, little tips and tricks, basically mental hacks, and it's just really been a lot easier when you get into work, and kind of help me be a little bit more efficient, be a little quicker in the way I work. And it's just something like it was a good read, and I think that it's a high recommended book by me, and I think everyone should grab a copy and take a read of that for sure.
Awesome. Okay, and I will link that into the blog post for this episode so people can look at that and purchase it. And I'll also put Jim Quick's Instagram. I follow his Instagram and it's wonderful. He gives a lot of tips and tricks and he does videos and things through that. So he's great. I haven't read his book, but you definitely just convinced me
Yeah,
that
you should
I need
definitely
to.
watch. Yeah,
I think my
yeah.
husband would like it too. He's really into stuff like that. So I think we'll have to go ahead
Yeah.
and purchase that.
I think there was a movie with Bradley Cooper in there. It was called Limitless, and it's loosely
Yeah.
based on a book, but not directly related, but like very
Oh,
very loose relation to it. So,
okay.
yeah, definitely a good read. I think.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to talk about LinkedIn because I have a course on LinkedIn and it's one of the things that I talk about a lot. First of all, like for anybody that's looking for what a solid LinkedIn profile looks like, Neil's profile is so good. He has everything filled out. It's very clear. I mean, your skill set is clear. Everything is so clear. So I'm going to link that in those show notes as well because I think it's just a really great example of what a solid LinkedIn profile looks like. And I so appreciate the tips that you shared because I feel like the majority of people do not take advantage of the power of LinkedIn
Mhm.
just from an informational standpoint, even if you don't use it to stay connected, which you should because it's very helpful. But the groups that you're talking about, like just information that you can get and finding people who have a path that you want to look at, like that is, if nothing else, it'll help you from a research perspective
Mhm.
start to craft potential options for what your career could look like in the future. Other um, companies and organizations, we get very narrow with what is out there based on what we see the most, but there are tons and tons of organizations out there that are doing similar things to Facebook and Google and all of that, and
Mhm.
that just gives us more information. So I so appreciate the LinkedIn tips, and I'll make sure to put those into like a social media post for
Yeah.
everybody because that is so good. And Google and
Mhm.
YouTube, I feel like are not, I mean, maybe they are utilized, but I think when I work with clients, I'm like, literally Google this.
Mhm.
Like Google, type it
Yeah.
in and see what resources come up because you can tell pretty quickly if it's a legitimate resource or not. Like it's pretty clear these days. And you never know what's going to come up. And it's so helpful when you're looking at different, different types of jobs, different types of industries. You want to see what's going on and check the news.
Mhm.
That's the other thing I always tell people to. If you're looking at a particular industry, at a particular organization, look at the news cycle around that organization to see what people are talking about with that particular organization because you just never know what you're going to find and it gives you different information. So I love this. Resourcing
Yeah.
yourself, searching, these are all such good tips for people to remember really at any point in their career. I think
Yeah, exactly. If you're searching now, searching in 5 years, going different thing in 10 years, just keep researching. See what the trends are, see the changes that are happening, and then pivot yourself, based on that and on information. Reach out to the right people. Read the right descriptions. Again, check the
Mhm.
news. All these things are super helpful.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
have to make a plug for MBTI because I'm an MBTI coach too. I'm trained and certified in MBTI. It's something I use in my coaching program and I love it. It's one of my favorite assessments that's out there for people and it does a lot for the career side. It's one of the few assessments that has a really strong career connection so that you get some really clear, like, here's how you can approach researching, here's how you can approach decision making, here are some careers that might work for you.
Mhm.
Like so clear and I love it. So I just had to make a plug
Yeah.
for that since you mentioned it because it's such a
Yeah,
great assessment.
definitely. And it's interesting because you get your MBTI and then you start looking at the job that you have or the job that you had, and you're saying, "Oh, that last job probably wasn't the best fit."
Mhm.
And so now that I'm in this new job, is it a good fit based on the MBTI? And you're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Collaboration or this, or are you more analytical? Are you more collaborative? Are you more teamwork? Are you more
Right.
a lone wolf kind of thing? So that helps, based on your preferences and how find a career that really speaks to that.
Yeah.
So you'll get more career satisfaction out of that instead of just going for a job that looks good on paper is high paying, and you're miserable in there, after 6 months or a year. Yeah.
Right. Also, I have to make a plug for the step 2. So it's MBTI step 2 assessment, because a lot of times people are like, I don't want to be put in a box with these 4 letters. But when you do step 2, which most people do not do, it breaks down each of those letters into a different subset of characteristics and preferences. And I found that has been way more helpful for my clients than just their 4 letters. So if that's something you're interested in, if you like MBTI and you've never done step 2, or you wanted to contact me, because seriously, it is life changing. It's so good. Okay. So one of the last questions that I like to ask is, tell me about a time when you felt like you really took control of your career.
Ooh, okay. That's a good question. Let's see. I think the time where it became very clear that I was kind of owning, owning myself and what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go, probably my time in grad school. I think just what I did there, what I accomplished there, that really set the tone and set me up for getting into where I'm at right now. I went into grad school thinking that it's just going to be 2 years. I'm going to like fly under the radar, finish this, and eventually just go back into clinical medicine, at some point. But actually the summer before I got into grad school, so that August, I actually got a position on one of the student associations at the School of Community and Global Health, and then I also got myself into a fellowship, which is required, for the course. And it's really those two things that stuck to me. That it's like, okay, well, there's the school part, but there's also this additional things that are going to support me, help me learn, help me get some skills, help me network and build relationships and things like that. So kind of using that momentum from there, that really propelled me into doing more in grad school than just getting a degree and leaving. 6 months in, that's when I started seeing that that marriage between public health and business, and how they can feed off each other. So that prompted me to add on that MBA, and then just being able to take the classes, learn the skills, seeing that there's this other side of healthcare that I'm going to be able to get into, and be better equipped by taking all these courses. That really, jump started me into getting to what I really want to get into, which is like that healthcare business admin side of things. And so, what was supposed to be a 4-year program at that point, I did it in 18 months, and just went. I took extra units, took extra courses, tried to do all the learning I could possibly do. Joining student associations to help that networking and relationship building aspect, work on different projects to help the skills develop, analytical, group collaboration, those types of things, getting some fellowships and awards, monetary awards to help progress some of the projects that I had worked on, and then just being recognized into getting some honor societies, all that momentum really fueled, my passion to get into where I'm at right now. And so healthcare and management, that's, taking all those skills into healthcare management. That's the track I'm on now, and I think it was grad school that really triggered me to get into that, and I'm thankful for all the relationships that I made there, all the skills, the work, the extra hours I put in. It all really helped me get to where I'm at today, and will continue to help me, progress in that career too.
Awesome. Oh, I love that you shared that, because I mean, my audience knows I come out of higher education, but
Mhm.
I'm also very critical of higher education, and I'm very critical of master's degrees and advanced degrees, and whether or not it's the right thing for people
Right.
to do. And in your case, I love that you really expanded on that, because you made such a conscious choice in the programs that you were doing. They really fit where you were at, your career past and your career path. That's how you do it.
Mhm.
Like, this is what the advanced degree should look like for people. It can also be a switch, it can be a career switch, but it has to be intentional. And if you're going to pay to go to grad school, whether that's a master's degree or a PhD, whatever that looks like, any type of advanced degree, you need to have a plan for that, and you need to embrace it. And that's exactly what you did. Like, you did everything right. Everybody needs to listen to how Neil did this, because you want to be engaged. You want to take advantage of everything that is being offered to you there, because you're not going to get another chance to do that. And when you're a student, you have so many more opportunities to get in and do things and talk to people. Anytime you can use that, I'm a student, can I get 15 minutes of your time? People are way more willing to do that than when you're already in your career. So I so appreciate you sharing that, because as much as I ream on whether or not you should go to grad school, there is a right way to do it, and you've definitely done it. And I really appreciate you sharing that story.
No problem.
Okay. Neil, thank you so much. If people want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always checking it, at least once a day, maybe once every other day. So that's the best way to get a hold of me for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I will leave that in the blog post for this episode, specifically the LinkedIn profile, so that you can connect with Neil and really dig into his history and what he's done. He has all of the things that he did in grad school on his LinkedIn profile as well. So I think that's just a really great place to search out and see everything that's possible. Neil, again, thank you so much for joining today and sharing all of your experiences and your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
For sure. Thanks for having me. And hopefully everyone can get some knowledge and some advice from this and use it to better their careers.